Hi, welcome to the TEFL Commute, Season 4, Episode 4, where we put our pet peeves away into Classroom 101.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the TEFL Commute, a podcast for language teachers, which isn't about language teaching, but the topic will come up. I'm your host, Lindsay Clanfield, and today in this episode, we're doing something a bit different. We're bringing back our round table. So before we get started, let me just go around the table and our virtual round table, and everyone introduce themselves. So I'm Lindsay. Next person.
Hi, I'm Sean, as usual.
And I'm Kerry. How are you all doing?
And we have a fourth.
And I'm James, the techie guy who's been allowed back on the microphone yet again. I don't know what's going on.
Allowed? It was kind of coerced, wasn't it?
I don't mind. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, no. Yeah, right. How many emails did it take to get you on mic, James?
Well, okay. Fair enough.
Well, let me just explain why you're all gathered here today. Today we're doing something called Classroom 101, where we're going to put our pet peeves into Classroom 101. This is a riff on an existing thing called Room 101, which I'm going to ask Sean to just quickly explain to our audience if they haven't heard of Room 101 before.
Well, Room 101 is, of course, from Orwell's Big Brother. But where it's coming from here is the fact that in the UK on television there is a kind of comedy show called Room 101, and in that people choose random things that annoy them and put them away, get them out of their life by basically ranting about them on television. And I thought, along with Lindsay and James, that this might be a nice thing to do. Since we've got so many years of experience in ELT, there must be things that we have as pet peeves. So that's basically what it is. And Lindsay, you're going to moderate, yeah?
That's right. So what we decided is when we all sat down together and started thinking about what would we put in Room 101, we made a couple of rules. The first thing is it would be really easy just to put things like poor wages, bad working conditions, terrible contracts, and all that stuff. We decided to do something different. All of those are things that we would probably put in Room 101, but then we would end up really depressed at the end of this episode. So instead, what we have chosen is there are 4 areas, and each of us will talk about what we'll put in Room 101, or Classroom 101. One is a language point that we don't like teaching, or that we are annoyed at, or that we find useless, or something. We'll have to explain why. So the first is a language point. The second is a ELT activity, an activity that is part of our profession that we don't like doing, either as students or teachers or both. Okay, so an activity we put in there. The third one is a piece of terminology. ELT, like many professions, is littered with lots of terminology. Some would argue sometimes too much. And so I'm sure that each of us will be able to come up with one piece of terminology that we would prefer not to hear ever again and just gets locked away in Classroom 101. And the fourth and final thing is just a random thing that peeves us, that annoys us, and that we would put along with all these other things in Classroom 101. So everyone understand the rules? You're all good with that?
Yep.
Yeah, ready
to go.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to start with language points, okay? And I'm going to, I'll throw this over. We'll start with Kerry. What language point from the English language as an ELT teacher would you put into Classroom 101?
Okay, so this is kind of a fairly advanced one, but one that I've found I've had to teach and write exercises for, and I'm really fed up of it. It's inversion after negative or limiting adverbials. Stuff like, not only did he suffer from insomnia, he also whatever, I can't even think how to finish that sentence. Or no longer will she be able to stare fondly through the window. That kind of quasi-literary stuff, which really you can only get one example into any text anywhere. If you find these at all, it tends to be in classic literature, and as I say, you might get one sentence out of 3,000 words. Writing practice exercises for this in class is painful, as are the sentences that come out, which are really bound to be stiff, unnatural, and I don't want to hear another one again. Thank you very much. So that one, for me, is going into room 101.
I just think removing that.
I heard such a good example. Yes,
removing that will make most C2 course books pretty empty, won't it? I mean, it's a staple language point.
And the exams as well.
I know.
So they're only there because it's in the exam. Can we just start by removing it from the exam, maybe?
I know. I like teaching that, though. I don't like the board, but I like teaching it because you kind of like put arrows on the board, and it feels kind of cool. You know, like they haven't heard that before.
It's easy. Yeah, it's easy. It's one of those. Oh, you haven't heard this before. Shall I tell you why you haven't heard it before?
This one will get you guys.
Because you'll never use it. You'll never need it. And if they come across it because they're reading literature, well, they'll get it.
Yeah,
you know.
Not only does Lindsay like it, but he also draws arrows. So and there's definitely a use for it.
Seldom have I heard such an insult.
But I wonder.
No sooner had Kerry said that.
I wonder when I'm doing advanced levels. When I'm doing my advanced levels, I sometimes look at the grammar in the book, and I feel like, have they just put this here because they think they need to put some grammar here, and they think, well, the students have done they've done everything
Short
else.
answer. Yes.
But isn't that the students' fault as well? Because, I mean, there's so many students that come to class and going, oh, you know, I'm here for my advanced grammar. You know, it's kind of, there's a grammar system. You know, we don't suddenly unveil something particularly new at a higher level. We just get more research.
Save it up. There's that one. That's the one. That is, you know, the trump card.
And if I
don't mention that name.
Well, exactly. I think a very fitting name for the card.
But I think sometimes I feel like when I'm doing those kind of activities come up, I feel like, oh yeah, but then my students are still like they don't really have a particularly good understanding of the range of ways that the more basic grammar can be used. And I feel like sometimes the grammar activities at that level shouldn't be like, here's a new structure you've never seen before, but did you know you could do this with the present simple? You know.
Yeah, I think as Kerry says, though, it's a lot of it's to do with exams. You know, when you're teaching them, it is a banker for the exam. You know, it will come up in the exam. So, you know, it's kind of, it is there. That doesn't make it right, but
it's also a beauty if you're doing a literature exam. You just, look at this way that the language has been used to emphasize and blah-de-blah. But, you know, most of our students, they're not there, are they? They're not in class for that. Anyway, I don't want to teach it.
It's a powerful start.
I'm going to move us on because the time is ticking by, and I'm going to ask James now for his language point that he would put into classroom 101. James, take it away. What do you want to get rid of?
Well, mine isn't really something I've ever had to teach, although occasionally I've had to deal with this problem. But mine is the fact that English doesn't have a plural form of you. I think it's really bizarre, and I don't really know why that is. Why don't we have a use? You know, living in Brazil here, you know, we can use vocês to talk about, you know, the plural, but it's really odd that we don't have something so basic to just talk to more than one person at once. And
you mean what we do is you, but it's the same as the other one. You mean
but it's confusing, isn't it? It's confusing.
You all, or you all, or you guys.
Well, yeah.
Horrible American accent there, but that would be good. We could just teach that and have it peppered everywhere.
I was having a look at some of the kind of basically the examples that people have just invented because there's obviously a need, and then they've just done that. And yeah, you've got the one that I hear most often, which is you guys, and then you've got the deep South American y'all.
Can I interject? Is yous not Scottish? Is there not a use in?
There is, yeah, Scottish and Scouse, and it happens in the north of England in some places, and in Australia as well. But it's more of a dialect thing than an actual, part of the language. If you see what I mean.
Certainly,
my favourite, where I'm from, we would say, which is my favourite, I think, would be you lot. Oh, you lot.
Yeah.
Oh, you lot. Yeah.
Oi, you lot.
Oh no,
Nice.
childhood memories flashing back. Oh, you lot, come here.
I like that. I, you, he, she, it, you lot. We.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Okay.
Right, coursebook writers, get that into your next coursebook.
So we have inversion. We have use, or like why there is no use, so a slightly different one. I'm going to say one, and we'll finish with Sean afterwards, but I'll say mine. The language point that I would put into Classroom 101 is, and just because it's such a devil to explain, is present perfect for actions in the past that have an effect now. Sort of, I don't want to read that book. I've read it. Or let's go see Mission Impossible 5. Oh, I've seen it. That kind of, it just sounds so. I understand that it's a use and that it's one of the uses of present perfect, but it's just so awkward to explain it. And especially also because in North American English, you might even prioritize a past simple. Let's go see Mission Impossible 5. No, I saw it already.
Yeah, but so is your hatred or your dislike of it because you're influenced by North American English?
Probably, which also is, I know we could only put one in, but the other one I was going to put in was have got, which I can't stand teaching at elementary level.
Can't see the problem.
I've got the opposite problem now, is having to stop myself from using have got. So I really, really want to teach do you have, or so, and then I keep on slipping those have gots in class and having to kick myself about oh god, there it comes again.
There was, what was it? Was it an early edition of Headway that really made that a language point? I remember it really in my career where there's the language point was the difference between do you have and have got at pre-intermediate level, I think.
I think so. I remember suffering through that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like this whole language spread dedicated to it. But
that whole present perfect. Haven't you ever tried to sort of explain that to students? Find you're just tying yourself in knots. Yeah. We're using present perfect because it kind of has an effect now on the present, but it happened in the past, but it sort of has relevance to now.
Well, to use an example, to use you, Lindsay, I like it because you can draw arrows on the board. I mean, that's
yeah, but that's not as good.
It's the classic one of coming into class with a false cast on your arm or something, sort of.
Yeah.
I've broken my arm. That's why I've got a cast on there.
Yeah, it's a bit like that same kind of like use going to for future predictions, which you can predict right now based on present evidence, etc.
Lovely arrows.
Hang on, are you undermining your own language peeve here, Lindsay?
I know. I've managed to do 3. Sooner or later, I'll be criticized.
I don't think much of this judging going on here. Is like one rule for one, one rule for the 3 of us. Okay, now it's my turn. Here are my 12.
Okay. I'm going to go right to Sean. Sean, language point for Classroom 101. Go.
Mine is reported speech.
Hi. Reported speech.
Oh no, reported speech. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, it's in many ways, it's very similar to how to Kerry's point in the fact I think it's taught primarily for exams, and it's brought in at such a low level initially, and it's just that all these silly rules that the students need to get their head around about backshifting this and changing this word to that word, changing this to that. Oh, what a load of rubbish! It's just
totally disagree.
It's that thing. Go on then, Lindsay.
No, I just think that it makes perfect sense, and backshift is quite easy, and the concept of distance and everything is quite easy. Lovely arrows you can write there on the board.
Back to the arrow. Okay. I agree with Sean. I think about the being so rigid with it. It always backshifts and all of this.
Yeah,
and it's not true. It's just not true. It can be, it's that it doesn't reflect usage. And so you just kind of, okay, here's another rule that you've got to know, because in the exam you will have to do the backshift. And if you don't, you fail.
Carrie said it doesn't reflect usage. You see, there you go. I'm reporting what Carrie said. Don't need to backshift.
It didn't reflect usage at the
time. That's true. That's also true.
I just think it usually comes up at about pre-intermediate B1 level. Again, and a whole unit's dedicated to it, and I just think, oh, really? We wonder why students begin to lose their motivation in the English language.
I will give you this: that I particularly dislike the reported speech when you're doing the different reported verbs and whether they take an ing form or an infinitive. Like I denied, he denied saying.
Yeah.
He insisted on doing that kind of stuff that's always tricky. All right.
So the TEFL Commute course book, when it comes out, then is not going to have any present perfect actions. It's going to have no inversion, no reported speech, but it will introduce the plural form of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's going to change the world.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon to a bookshop near you.
Well, let's take a little break and come back with our least favorite activities.
One of my biggest pet peeves, the things teachers do. They'll call on people who don't know the answer, which makes no sense to me. But whenever I do my homework, she never checks it. And teachers, when you do erase on the whiteboard, please erase completely, please, please, please. Because they'll write a word, erase it, but they'll miss that one small spot, and I'll be sitting at my desk, annoyed and, wanting to erase it for them.
Okay, everyone, we've spoken about our Classroom 101 is now full of language points that we don't like. Now, time for our next section, which is activities. And I'm going to ask Sean to start this one and say what activity, what ELT activity, classroom activity, he would like to put away in that room.
Well, I'm going to start this with an activity which I've done millions of times, and I've taught teachers. I've taught countless number of teachers it when they first started teaching. But if I'm honest, I can't stand it. It's find someone who.
Oh, yes.
Many years ago, I think it's one of the first times I went to. I saw Penny Eyre actually in a conference doing a plenary. She was doing a talk about, and the talk is about pointless busyness, things we do in the classroom which kind of keep the students busy, but are they a bit pointless. And for me, this is find someone who. It is dull. It is pointless. We spend all this time, I understand it's kind of like a drill, but explaining it to the students, writing the sentence, and you've got to invent extra rules to actually make sure the students keep milling around and don't stand in one place. And it's just like, what is the point? Just get into pairs or groups and have a little talk about what you've done. Don't have to create photocopied sheets or worksheets just to have a contrived language point where students walk around and then don't find someone who can speak Spanish and then don't know what to do for the follow-up. Annoying.
So is it the mingling that bothers you the most?
I think the whole thing bothers me about it.
Having a nice time and chatting with each other. Is that what?
How do you feel about mingling in general?
If they had a nice time and chatted to each other, that's fine. But you've just got to contrive, you contrive the situation for them to walk around and find somebody who's got this name on it. And I can see its purpose, and I probably will do it again. I mean, I know I've got a training course coming up in a couple of weeks, and I know one of the activities I'm going to do is find someone who. But that doesn't stop me being annoyed by it.
Will you ask them to critique it afterwards?
I can. I will find a better way of doing it. But it's just. I mean, this is just. I mean, I saw this as an opportunity to get that off my chest and find someone who is now off my chest.
All right. Oof. Okay. Carrie, what about you? What activity would you put into Classroom 101?
Okay, well, I think there's a kind of a similarity with Sean's here, possibly, because I don't know if I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, Sean, but I think part of the find someone who thing is that it takes a long time to actually prepare the thing. And I know some people love this activity, but anyway, here we go. They're in those resource packs, and it's the domino activities, and they're great. The idea is good. You match the collocations or, whatever it is, chunks. And I can see the purpose and all the rest of it, but it takes forever to actually make the damn things, to copy them and laminate them and cut them up and all the rest of it. So and there's definitely an inverse proportion of the time I'm spending preparing and the time the students are going to spend doing it. And then if they actually follow the dominoes game, it never works. It just doesn't work. There aren't enough matches. It's like if you play dominoes, there are 6 sixes. It's not just one match.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're putting together a jigsaw, and that's even more deadly boring. Because if you're I remember realizing this and thinking, oh God, okay, why don't you just put them together then? Don't play dominoes at all because it doesn't work as a game. Just put them together, and it was, no, God, where's the fun in that? So it was. I'm sorry. Dominoes, yes, if you want to play dominoes, make the lovely rattling noise of the dominoes on the bar and all the rest of it, but not in class with chunks and collocations. Thank you very much.
I had a student once. I had a group once, and I thought, I'm going to be clever here. So I gave out the dominoes and got them to cut them up. And one of my students, she cut all of the dominoes right down the middle. And
no!
And then I looked at her like, "What have you done?" And then she started sticking them back together, but she stuck the wrong pieces.
The next 40 minutes of the class.
Yeah, complete. I was just like, "Here's the bin. Forget it."
I'm with Kerry on that one. Although some of my students do enjoy kind of trying to piece it together in one, not as dominoes, but almost in a collocation chain.
Oh yeah, like the snake. That works. Yeah. I actually do get students to make their own as well. Like, it's another one is kind of, I don't make it myself. I just give them a blank sheet and they have to make them and cut them up and give them to each other and put it into a snake. But again, there's a lot of time spent just cutting things up and very little production in the end. It's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't seem worth the time.
Right. So we have now in our Classroom 101, in terms of activities, we have Find Someone Who. We have dominoes for language points. James, it's over to you. What activity would you put into Classroom 101?
Well, mine is very similar to Kerry's, actually. And now, Lindsay, you might have strong feelings about this, so I just need you to hear me out, okay? So my one is board games. Now, wait.
Blasphemy!
Wait. Now, here's the situation, okay? We're getting towards the end of a unit or maybe towards the end of the course, and I need a nice review activity so that my students can, before they have their test, they can do some revision of the key language points they've learned in the previous few weeks. And I open my teacher's book and I see a board game, which requires me to photocopy the board. Maybe I need 3 sets of this because of the size of my class. And then I've got 2 different sets of cards, and I have to photocopy all of them and sit there and cut them all out. And of course, if you don't have a laminator, then you're going to have to do all this again in 3 months because your students are going to make a right mess of all the cards. And it just takes forever to go through, just like the dominoes. It takes forever to get the whole thing ready, to set it up, to explain the rules and everything. So I have no problem in theory with board games. I like them a lot, but the problem is just how if they could just be delivered to me, like, here's your board game to play. Okay, thanks. But it's the fact that I have to sit there for hours.
What you're saying there is basically what publishers need to do is turn their resource packs into apps, so the app is ready to go. We just switch it on and everybody can do it.
Oh, but you want the tactileness of
blah 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 blah.
Hey, touch screen. That's okay.
Yeah, well done.
Or but maybe just be pull out from the back of the teacher's book. You could
true pop them out.
Pop up. It could just pop up.
Yeah. It's interesting how James, myself and Kerry are all very experienced teachers, and we've all gone for things that take time. It's just like stop the preparation time.
It is, but it's just that anything that's inversely proportionate to the amount of time that you spend and how much time it takes in class.
I was completely agreeing, but I also think of my very young, inexperienced self thinking, "Oh, great! Look at this board game, or look at all that."
Yeah.
The
fact that it's just the amount of time, and when you know that there must be a better way of doing this, which would take you like 5 minutes to prepare.
Yeah.
You know it exists.
Okay, so we've now established that in your classrooms there are no games, no playing, and no chatting. Okay, so that sounds
I think it's called going with the learners. I think there's something called dogma or something like that.
All right, I'm going to finish off this section then with an activity that I would put in. Of course, I wrote down 2 activities, but I'm just going to choose one. All right, so people don't start.
Can you do that?
I'm going to say that the one that I would put into Classroom 101 is any kind of guided visualization where you're asking the students to, like, put your head on the table, close your eyes, and now imagine this, that, or the other. I cannot stand those. I couldn't stand those in workshops when I'm asked to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on this.
My eyes open. I remember being really into like all the motivation theory until the latest motivation theory, which I understand, which is, thinking of the ideal L2 self. But then some of the practical activities realization of that is sort of close your eyes and imagine you are speaking perfect English. And I was like, no, you're not going to do that. I'm not going to ask you to do that. Curiously enough, about this activity that I hate doing as a teacher, one time I did force myself to do it, and a whole bunch of students, well, not a whole bunch, like 2 or 3, came up and said, we really like that. Can we do that again? So
I thought you were going to say you closed your eyes into a whole bunch of students and vanished from the classroom.
I wish I could. I can't stand those.
Interestingly, I was involved in a webinar recently where the speaker said, I just want you to close your eyes. I'm thinking, you can't see them anyways. How do you know?
Yes.
Actually, that for me is the winner. I can't stay here now. You can find someone who, as long as you get rid of guided visualization. Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
I like those kind of pop psychology ones, though. I think they can be fun. Where you kind of go, right, okay, you're walking in a forest. What's your forest like? And then
that's about a dream, isn't it?
What's your bear like? And then you find a key. And what's your key like? Blah blah blah. And then they talk to each other about what theirs were like. And then there's this kind of pop interpretation of you and
I'll get into birds and interpret what your friend
yeah that's good.
Sounds suspiciously like fun to me.
Yeah, I know it's all bad science.
Pulling teeth for me, that would be. But anyway, all right, so we've now gone to activities. Let's take another short break and we'll be back with terminology.
The thing that is in room 101 is the worst thing in the world. It goes beyond fear of pain or death. It is unendurable, and it varies from individual to individual.
Okay, everyone, we're getting there. This next thing that we're going to put into Classroom 101 is just beginning to get quite crowded now with activities and language points. Now these are little things that we're going to be chucking in there, which are terminology, bits of terminology that we would put into Classroom 101. I'll kick this one off. The piece of terminology I would put into Classroom 101 would be can-do statement.
Ooh.
That's very controversial.
Very brave of me to do this. I know that there's good reasons for can-do statements. I just find that more and more now, the realization of the can-do statements is just... publishers, I think, and books and stuff are trying to make can-do statements for everything. Everything has to be measured into a can-do. So you get these sort of ridiculous acrobatics of tick the can-do statements. I can understand an article about zoos. Well, no, you can't. You can understand the article in this course book that someone wrote at an A2 level. You can understand that one, maybe, but you can't understand articles about zoos.
We are getting to I think we're getting to that tipping point moment where there's beginning to be the backlash against can-do statements and SEFR itself to a certain extent.
SEFR.
SEFR, that's great. I've never heard it called SEFR before.
SEFR?
I've just come back from a school. It's because I've just come back from the school where they call it SEFR CEFR rather than...
Could you explain that for the listeners and perhaps some of us who have...
the Common European Framework of Reference of levels, which is where the can-dos come from.
I've never heard it called SEFR before. Where have I been?
No, I'm going to use SEFR from now. Definitely.
Sorry.
Confuse people with
SEFR. As I say, I just picked up in the school I was in. Sorry, that was I've just where it was.
Sean, you think there's a backlash beginning against the can-do?
Well, not necessarily about can-do, but this whole idea of it's the kind of measurability of things, isn't it? Again, and we've got to that point where in language teaching, where everything's becoming almost like commoditized and measurable, and it's kind of we're forgetting that it's a living, breathing language. There was the discussion. I think we were discussing it recently ourselves. The idea of how it's actually these are carrying through into course materials, which is therefore making the course materials very generic and very stale from it. And that's kind of the backlash of it, that all this material is becoming very, very samey and generic rather than being interesting to a certain extent.
I don't think we should blame the CEFR as such, or the SEFR. Sorry,
I think it's the interpretation. You're right.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't. Exactly. No, I'm not. I wasn't. I'm not.
No, I wasn't saying you were, but this whole backlash. It's kind of aimed possibly in the wrong place. I completely agree, Lindsay, with this. How ridiculous they can be sometimes. They're not can-do statements. That's the thing. It's the way that they're twisted to fit the activity that's on the page, but still have to be generic enough to be a can-do statement. It just
perhaps the original
silly exercise
were okay because they were slightly vaguer or more broad. Whereas the more you try to make them specific, the more you escape them. Let's keep going.
There's a whole podcast in that. We'll come back to that one and talk about that in a future series.
Let's keep going then. Sean, your bit of terminology, and I'm going to ask us all to start speeding up now, except for me, of course.
Yeah, it's fine for you. Although again, you did manage to cut it down to one answer, so well done. Mine is EdTech acronyms. Obviously. It's just, why do we need so many? I mean, we have too many acronyms full stop in our profession, but EdTech acronyms, what is something? Is it CARL? Is it TEL? Is it MAL? Is it MALU? Is it, just like stop confusing the issue of educational technology by bringing in all these acronyms and using all these differences. As a EdTech person, we're trying to educate teachers in how to use technology to better their teaching, or as a way of complementing their teaching, and you're trying to help them, and then you say, well, go look it up, but this, and this, you need to teach them a whole dictionary before they can actually start to access stuff. And it just annoys me that there are so many for it, and they're so used by different people for different things. There you go.
All right, anyone have a comment on that? I would agree, but I'm not that aware of all the different ones. The ones that you said really quickly, I kind of knew one or two, but I know there are lots of others, and people always distinguish themselves differently. Mobile assisted language learning and whatever. BYOD.
Assisted language, yeah.
Well, even BYOD, by some people, it's called BYOT, and it's just like, Anyway, we're supposed to be quick, so I was trying.
Okay, let's go over to James then. James, terminology that you would put into Classroom 101.
Well, I'll try and be quick, but I did an hour talk about this. So, 21st century skills.
Oh yeah.
I mean, for a start, it's nearly 2017 already, so we're getting to the stage where we're about a fifth of the way through the century, and we're still talking about this like it's a new thing.
Do my head in ache.
Yeah, I just I feel like so much of it is a distraction that seems kind of irrelevant to language teachers, really. And I recognise some aspects of it as being worthwhile and important, but I feel like a lot of the time people are talking about this like it's a thing, and then you go, yeah, but why is this a thing? Why are we talking about this so much? Still at conferences you get like so many talks about 21st century skills.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%.
Well, I think it's like can-do statements. I think it's become a marketing slogan for publishers. That they feel that they've got to have this book contains 21st century skills on it.
I think it's also a business mantra as well, kind of for the business of education, especially in the States. There's this whole, how do we prepare our students for the world of work in the 21st century? And it's all this idea of, our students aren't people at all. They're just they're going to slot in there into the economy, and how are they going to help the economy? And yeah, I'm with you too, James.
I think we should point out to listeners that if things like that are new to you, even some of the activities, we'll make references on the website so you can go and read about them in more detail if you're not quite sure about some of the things that we're saying. Lindsay, must be you.
Carrie.
Carrie. Yeah.
Eventually, Carrie. Carrie, for our last bit of terminology, just to review, we've put in there can-do statements, a whole bunch of EdTech acronyms. We've put 21st century skills as a used and abused term. I think we should probably mention that all of these things have their good uses as well. But maybe
absolutely.
Carrie, what would you add?
Okay, so it's an easily confused pair, mine, and it's inductive and deductive presentations. And I hate this one because, especially on training courses, it's just not intuitive, is it? You would think, which one do you think is the discovery? Oh, well, did you sing something? No, it's not. It's the other way around. And so then people trip up over it, and they're never confident about which one they're using. And so I suggest we just get rid of both of them and use something else instead. So maybe discovery instead of inductive and rule-based instead of deductive, and that tends to get me out of trouble. But when anybody throws up one of those two in conversation, you can just see panic entering the trainee's eyes.
Yes, just for our listeners, and James, I'm going to ask you, can you just tell listeners quickly, because you're a jargon guy, what's the difference between an inductive approach and a deductive approach?
No, I can't. You've called me out. You've exposed me as a fraud.
So for me, it seems to be counterintuitive, but the inductive approach is the discovery approach. So where you look at examples and then from there you find out the rules or deduce the rules, which is where the confusion comes from. And deductive is where you start with the rule and then from the rule you generate examples. I think that's
Got
right.
it. Yes.
Okay.
You know how I used to explain to trainees? I used to say inductive. Imagine you're like inducing labor.
You get your board markers out and draw the
arrows.
Yeah, where are those arrows going? I don't know.
I don't get the analogy at all.
If I had to choose one, that's a difficult one because I agree with Kerry's, but I think I detest James's the most. Actually, the 21st century skills. That's a tricky category. All of them, I think, are welcome to be consigned to the rooms.
So we're going to have one final mini break, and then we're going to be back with a very quick wrap up of 4 final things that we'll shove into that room before we close the door and throw away the key. Stay with us, everybody. Okay. All right, we've come to the end. Our Classroom 101 is full of 4 language points, 4 different kinds of activities, lots of different terminology into 4 groups. And the last thing, we're just going to go around the table, not going to necessarily explain all of these because otherwise it'll take forever, and just say the last one random thing. We're allowed to throw one more thing in that room before we slam the door and then walk away much relieved. So I'll start with you, Kerry. The last random thing that you were going to throw into Classroom 101 to make your teaching life a lot better. Go.
Okay, questions that started with what is your favorite? Because they're guaranteed to make my mind go blank.
Okay. Questions to start with what is your favorite? Okay. Sean.
Kerry. What's the favorite thing that you've done in this podcast?
No, I don't know. Mine's gone blank.
Sean, over to you. The last thing that you will throw into Classroom 101 before we lock the door and throw away the key.
Anyone who can't get my name right.
Whoa,
which aspect in particular?
And I'm with you there as well.
Is it?
But I'm.
Is it a spelling thing, Sean?
No, it's a. Well, I don't think we had time to explain. Everything about me on social online is my name. So Sean Wilden is my Skype name. Sean Wilden is my email address. So when people email me and start dear Sean S.E. or no, hi Sean S-E-A-N, it just annoys me. You know, you're supposed to be teachers. You're supposed to be able to read.
Okay, we get it. Don't rant. That's it. I'm sorry. I opened Pandora's box. Yeah. Sorry.
I'll say mine quickly here. Poor quality whiteboard markers. The kind that if you don't store them properly, they run out and it's like was brand new on Monday and it's Wednesday and they're already dead.
Put the top on properly, Lindsay. Come on.
Well, those all go into Classroom 101. And finally, James, you're going to close it off and then you're going to lock the door. Okay. What goes in there?
So this is a public service announcement for teachers. Please stop writing in course books with a pen. It really annoys me. You can use a pencil, that's fine. But stop writing in pen all over the course book, which I have to use in the next course. It drives
Especially on my ebook, you're making a mess of my tablet. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, listen, we're coming to the end of our podcast. I
think we all feel a little bit better for getting those things off our chest.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Of course, if you're listening to us and you want to share something that you would throw into Classroom 101, you can find us on Facebook at the TEFL Commute on Facebook. You can find us on our website, www.teflcommute.com, and you can find our podcast YouTube, Podomatic, iTunes, and anywhere else you find your podcasts. I think it's time for me to say thank you to everyone before we have a big sound effect of a door closing of Classroom 101. So thank you, Carrie, for coming and joining us. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you, James, for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Right, see you next time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
As your commute is coming to an end, here is how you can play your own version of the 101 game. The game is useful as a speaking exercise, with students giving a spoken argument for why they like their thing and then asking and answering follow-up questions. Before the lesson, think of categories for the students to discuss. Remember, it's people talking about what they most dislike, so you might want to choose categories that are easy to talk about, for example, food, hobbies, and so on. In class, explain the concept of the game, illustrating with your own examples. Put the categories on the board and give the students time to prepare their argument for each. When everyone is ready, put the students into small groups and let them discuss their choices. If you want to add a competitive element, then each round can have a judge to decide which one choice from each category can be banished to Room 101. You can find the instructions for these activities at our website, www.teflcommute.com. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Sean Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.